set fire to my world, couldn't handle the heat. Now I'm sleeping alone and I'm starting to freeze. Baby, come bring me help, let it rain over me. Baby, come back to me. I want you to ruin my life, you to ruin my life, you to ruin my life, yeah. I want you to fuck up my nights, yeah, fuck up my nights, yeah, all my nights, yeah. I want you to bring it all on. If you make it all wrong, then I'll make it all right, yeah. I want you to ruin my life, you to ruin my life, you to ruin my life. I miss you.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Morning Coffee. I'm your host. I'm kind of going to be your co-host today, Rick Alexander. I'm going to be joined by host actual Danielle McGinnis. Danielle, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me as the host.
So for most of you, or some of you, I guess, that have been listening and following along this journey over the last few months, know that I did an episode about it, and then I actually took a couple of weeks off of life, in a way, to ride my bike from Maine. I originally was going to go to Florida, realized I didn't really have a lot in Florida that I cared about getting to, and so I changed the destination to Danielle's house in Charlotte, North Carolina, which put me just over 1,000 miles. And I did the whole thing in 12 or 13 days. I took a day off, one full day off to work, and then one half day off to work. And then I actually worked throughout it and did the client thing and did emails and worked on my book. Like really, I worked a lot throughout it, and my goal was to work throughout it completely. But I ended up not working as much as I thought because the pain ended up being more than I thought, and just like the sort of emotional bandwidth and the toll that it took on me ended up being more than I thought. But instead of me just talking about that experience, I actually decided what I would do is just bring Danielle on to sort of host the thing and ask me the questions, because I never know, like, my own mind. I'm so weird and I'm into such crazy shit that I forget that other people aren't into this like sort of lifestyle that I am. So I take for granted normal things. And so I thought that it'd be good to have her come on and ask me questions that probably a normal mind would have to contend with a little bit more than mine, because I'd overlook things and I would make leaps in logic. And so I just thought this would be a cooler format. So thanks for agreeing to do this.
Yeah, of course. So the first question that I'm going to ask you was probably the question that first came to my mind when you FaceTime me and you're like, I'm going to ride my bike from Maine to Florida. And my initial reaction was like, why? Why in the hell would you want to do that in the middle of November? So what was the initial like thought or the catalyst that made you decide on this particular adventure, the bike, the route?
Whole thing? You know, every year in November, it's something I do. I reserve a bit of time for myself in November to do something that stretches me physically. So last year I did the 240-mile run in body armor. The year before that, I did a 205-mile run through 80,000 feet of climbing in the mountains. And that was the first year. So this was the third year that I've done something at the end of the year just to like really recalibrate my entire sense of comfort and my entire sense of safety. And so I started doing that regularly just because I find that if I don't, like I personally start to care about shit that doesn't matter. Like I just, all the little things in life that like start to bug you over time, I feel like I need to recalibrate my pain tolerance in a way just so that I can contend with like normal stuff and like put it where it goes, right? It's like I think we go through life and really small things like the guy that cut us off in traffic tend to take up more real estate than they deserve in our heads. And I like prize my real estate. Like the way that I use my mind is like the most important thing in the world to me. And what I find is it actually takes going out into that physiological discomfort in order to get the mind where it needs to be. It's kind of like that one meme you've seen that's like, or maybe you haven't seen it, but it's like, civilize the mind but make savage the body. Have you ever seen that? No, I saw that and it like has always resonated with me, because that's the thing. I'm always like, man, I love to push myself, figure out what I'm physically capable of, but what I actually care about is the part that I get to take with me, which is all the mental lessons and tools and tricks and things that I learn along the way, which in this one I ended up learning. I mean, after 12 days of just being outside and in the elements and really just suffering quite a bit, you learn so much about yourself. There's no way that you don't. So for me, it's like that forced growth opportunity.
So we'll definitely talk about all the learning lessons and such. But one of the questions I had was, obviously, like when you're doing this adventure, your nervous system is on high, right? All this adrenaline is going.
Sure.
So it's like a super high. So when either, not even after you're done, but even during, did that exaggerate like the lows that you had? Like the extreme of the high, does that exaggerate the lows for you?
Like emotionally?
Anything.
I would say yeah, because I mean, the one thing I noticed about this race, or not race, but just this event, is that the polarities were super pronounced. So like there were times, especially around sunset, when I was feeling really good. It seemed like it took my body all damn day to feel good, and then somewhere around 2 is like when my legs like really legitimately felt like they were under me and I could ride hard. And so from like 2 until it was dark, or till I got to wherever I was going that night, was when I felt the best. And there were times where I was so happy, it legitimately, I was like, it felt like I was getting away with something that I shouldn't have. And then at the same time, there were moments, I would say at the beginning of the day normally, when it was just like the lows were so low. And so, yeah, the polarities were really pronounced. There was like very little time that I was just like, oh, everything's fine. It was like I was either suffering or I was like really on cloud 9. And I think that just has to do with spending such a long period of time on the bike. You know, you just end up going through both.
So what was something that you did when you were in the low points and, you know, your physiology was going to shit, your mind was going to shit? Like, what were things that you did or you said, or what was your narrative?
I tried to, so I used my phone a lot. I would just like tap my headphones and talk into the notes. And so sometimes that like the translation was garbage. So like I look back at some of those notes and I'm like, I don't really know what I was thinking there. Like I don't know what I was saying because it translated such garbage. But the thing that the reason I bring that up is because when I'm in a low, I've found that like when you're like suffering in life, no matter how it is that you're suffering, there are profound lessons. Like, I mean, really. And so one of the things I would do is like, you know, mentally, I knew I wasn't going to stop. And that's something I would say for everybody going into anything hard, just commit to not stopping. Like figure out what are the conditions in which you'll quit. And if you do not reach those conditions, then you keep going, right? And so that way it's not on the table. Because if you're going back and forth, like, do I want to keep going? It's like, eventually you do not want to keep going. There's too many reasons. But that being said, when you find yourself in these moments of suffering and these really hard times, there's profound lessons. You have to be willing to find them. And so what I would do is when I was in those moments where like it really, really sucked, except for the shittiest time, like I was basically in survival mode on that day, which we'll talk about, I'm sure. But for most of the lows, which were like a lot of times I'd get like a headwind in the morning or something, I would just like start thinking of the lesson. And honestly, like me thinking about the lesson would pass enough time that often I would get out of the lows. So like one of the things that I noticed is like, I was like really, I think I told you about this. I was going downhill and it's like this, it's below freezing. It's like 20 degrees with wind chill. The wind's blowing in my face. And because my bike was so boxy, because it had everything I needed to live, the wind would stop me as I was going downhill. And it would like, if I stopped pedaling for too long, like my momentum would just die. So it was like really frustrating because I was in Jersey, I want to say. I was like really far. I was like not even halfway yet. And so one of the things I remember thinking is like, well, guy, if the only time you notice the wind is when it's in your face, of course you're going to have a problem with it, right? And that's what I noticed. It was like, I was like, man, that was like one of my big lessons, like when I was in that particular day of pain. And I had to stop a lot because I just had to get out of the cold because I wasn't really that well prepared gear-wise, and it was just really fucking cold. And so I would get out of the cold and I would just be like drinking coffee, like thinking, because it's not about like, how do I get myself out of this? You get yourself out of it by pedaling forward, but like, what's the lesson here? And so that was one of the things I noticed is like a lot of the negative things I was replaying in my head. It's like, well, that's when you're starting to notice it. There's other times where the wind's at your back, but you're just like, you didn't stop to be grateful for that. So if the only time you notice the wind is something negative, you're going to have a negative connotation with the wind. And so I noticed that you could do that with anything in life. It's like, if the only time you notice shit is when it's bad, then that will be the scenario that you play out. And so that actually does mean that I think the state that you pass time in is a bit of your choice, because you could be grateful for those things or you could be resentful of those things. And so finding the times where to be grateful actually turned into like this time of me mining myself for better times. Like that's essentially what it turned into. So huge lesson there.
So do you feel as if like times like that and all the adventures that you've done, do you feel like these are, you know, you said that you do them so you don't end up doing like self-destructive, like unconscious self-destructive behaviors or whatever. But do you feel like they're also like the biggest catalyst for your creativity?
Yeah, and I don't really know why, right? Like, I mean, I don't know why movement makes me more creative. Like, I'll go out and walk. Like, I walk every day for extended periods of time, and that's normally because that's how my mind thinks the best. And so, yeah, I think they are a catalyst for creativity. I mean, I know part of that is because BDNF, right, brain-derived neurotropic factors, increased when you are under physical exertion. So, like, your ability to remember things is better. Your ability to connect dots in your head and create new concepts is better. But there's like a law of diminishing return on BDNF too. It's like at some point then you start to suffer, and now like you become almost useless in your creative ability. And I would notice that, which is why I was trying to take such good notes throughout it, because I would go through a couple hours where I was like super creative and I was like, man, I'm going to solve the world's problems. And then like 2 hours later, I'm like, I can't solve my own fucking problems or get out of my own way. And so I was like finding that it was super important to take notes and take advantage of the good times.
So what do you feel like your biggest, I guess, sacrifices were during the actual bike ride?
My biggest sacrifices?
Yeah.
That I like what I had to sacrifice?
Yeah.
I mean, time with you for sure. That sucked. Right? That was like 2 weeks of like not getting to see you. And it was I spent a considerable amount of money, you know, so that kind of sucked too. Like, and then I would say, I think also too, like sacrificing productivity, just because, you know, I have my book launch coming up and I was redesigning the Clarity Academy, but you know, it's hard to say when you sacrifice something, what do you get, right? It's like I did sacrifice that time, but I'd also say that I came out of it with so much clarity and so much direction that right now I'm like, I wouldn't give that back for the world. So you do sacrifice things, and I think most of our lives is just figuring out what we want to trade for what we want, you know? I mean,
right. So, you know, a lot of, at least where I was raised, you know, a lot of people think that the people that just like kind of can travel around the world and do all these adventures, like it's kind of like a coping mechanism for some deeper issues. Right? So do you feel like what's your perspective on that? Because you're doing these and you're sacrificing money, you know, time investment into your business, but like you're also getting a ton out. So like, what would you say to those people
that think that like a nomadic life is? Yeah. I mean, there are people that are running from their problems, right? I mean, for sure, I'd say, who even could add a percentage, but probably half of the traveling I've done is because I was trying to outrun myself, you know? And I would say even with endurance events, like I have to ensure that I'm not using them as escapism, because I tend to use them too much, and then I was telling you about last night, like I kind of break that for myself. Like I did that with alcohol in my 20s. Like I drank a lot, but then they reached a point where it's like, oh, this doesn't work for me anymore. And I don't want running and biking and my like love for endurance to become that escapism, because it's something I get so much from. So I am pretty cognizant of that in my own life. But what was the question?
Like, basically, what would you tell the people that, you know, think that it's a coping mechanism for underlying issues, right?
Oh, well, I think everybody's coping for things, right? I mean, I think that we live this world that's taught us that comfort and happiness are the same thing, you know, and they're just not. So I think that, yeah, I don't know. I think everybody's coping for something, and I think that this life is just an experience, and it's however you want to experience it personally. And I've personally found that like life reveals its mystery to me when I'm in the depth, you know, when I'm suffering, when I'm in the polarities. It's something I thought a lot about, because a lot of people feel content to just sort of like live a routine existence, and I don't know if they really feel content or if they're coping for something, or like trying to shut some part of themselves off, or if that's, you know, it's like it takes all things. But I kept thinking a lot about the ideas behind Buddhism when I was out there, and the whole idea that like we're stuck in this endless cycle of samsara, of death and rebirth, and that, and like all that it's painful, right? Because when parts of you die so that parts of you can be reborn, one of the things we never talk about in the growth industry is like the part that dies, like there's a lot of mourning that goes, and like that was you, that was part of you, you know. And I was thinking on this bike ride, you know, I think you could experience this life any way you want. That's pretty certain that in 2019. For me, I'm realizing I actually think the point is to be more human, to be okay with the polarities, to live in it, to not try to escape it. Like I think it sucks. Yeah, like pain sucks, but the lessons are worth it. And then for some reason they make the love worth it, right? And then when in the good times, and then just like with you, it's like there were 2 weeks where I didn't get to see you, and I had incredible longing during that time. Like I was like wanting to be with you so much it hurt a little bit. And I thought about that, and I was like, well, but like longing, I was like, what is this to me? Like what's happening right now? This sucks. Why am I doing this? And I'm like, well, I think what I really came to was like longing was a celebration of the fact that something like that incredible, like love like we have, could exist in the first place. And so I'm not trying to escape that shit. Even when it sucks, I like try to sit in it. I try to feel it because I think I want to be more human, not less. And these kinds of experiences just sort of open up the door to do that.
So do you think that because this particular endurance event you did without a crew, so you did it completely by yourself.
Yeah.
So do you feel like maybe that's a reason why, is so you could kind of feel that, I guess, alone, like you were alone?
Yeah.
The whole thing.
Totally.
Was there a reason why you chose to do that? Was that intentional? Like.
Yeah, because a lot of people had hit me up and they were like, oh, I want to ride part of it with you. And I was like, oh, that's super cool. And I like, it was hard because I really appreciated all the support and people wanting to ride with me. But then I've had a solo and self-supported trip on my bucket list for a really long time. Like I've wanted to do that. I realized all the other endurance events I do, like the ones I talked about before, I rely so heavily on my crew, like to get me through, not just for aid, not just for like patching up my feet and giving me food, but like mentally, like I rely on seeing a friendly face when I'm like at my lowest and just continuously going. And I wanted to take that from myself because it's like, how much do I rely on that? Turns out a shitload, right? And so I was like, no, I if I'm putting my back against the wall, I got to be true about it. And that requires me to take away the biggest source of comfort in the most uncomfortable times that I experience. And so that's what I did, and that's what I got. And like, I think people, again, I say this, I've been saying it more lately, but I think we commit to being uncomfortable in only ways that we're comfortable with. And it's like, but that's not what growth requires. Growth requires the actual discomfort. And so when you have to be really honest with yourself about what's creating the comfort in your life and whether it's serving you or not. Now, this is just an arbitrary arena, right? It's like, it doesn't really matter. But it's the practice of stripping beliefs and comforts from myself that I actually wanted to get to, which is what is transferable. Like everything about this adventure, I focused on the part I took with me, not the physical part. Like that was just the vehicle. That's what got me there. But at the end of the day, like I was actually trying to put myself in these uncomfortable situations and work through them, you know?
So society today, I feel like really thrives on routine. And like whatever that is to one particular person. So it's really uncomfortable, me in particular, when I get out of my routines, how uncomfortable that is for me. So did you like experience like a lot of discomfort there? I mean, you don't require like a really set routine, but you do have one.
Yeah.
So did you like have a particular routine throughout, or?
I did. I mean, so I got in a routine. I did yoga just about every night when I'd finish this like routine. So I built one. I had you help me with some exercises, and then I also found some like 10 to 12 minute post cycling yoga things on YouTube. And so I kind of like rotated through those. I had more plans for a routine, but it kind of fell apart when I was on the road because it was hard, right? Because like in the mornings I normally write, but I'm writing and I'm wasting daylight and the days are short and I keep like fucking myself and be riding at night and it's like raining and cold and at night it just sucked. So I was like, I couldn't like mentally let myself sit there and write and like be all in it. Mm-hmm. And so I would say a lot of my routine basically went out the window, and I found these like survival routines to do to like keep my body moving and stuff.
Do you feel like that translates to like your ability to make quick pivots in life when you have to like make quick decisions like that, like, oh, I'm wasting daylight, like I have to do this, and then you switch mindsets.
100%. And I don't know if you noticed that living with me, but like I think and we've talked about like my attachment style. Like I'm not attached to things like that. Like I am really good at letting that stuff go. It can hurt me because there's a part of the spectrum where that becomes impulsive, right? It's like, so there's like, you know, the full thing there, and you're going to deal with the polarities like you do. But I would say that, I think it does. I think it translates. And that was part of it, right? Like people are always like, man, because I don't plan shit in my life. Like, not really. I plan stuff, but only to like a high level, and then I'm like out. And the reason being is like, I just know it's going to work out. It doesn't not work out. Like this is life, and it works out. And even if it doesn't work out, it just will work out later. It just hasn't worked out yet. Like it's like, oh, this sucks. Everything sucks. It's like, we just got to wait. Like life's feeling complete and feeling broken. They're just as temporary as its counterpart. You know, it's like whatever you're going through is going to pass. And I think I know that deep down. And so like this trip, right? First of all, I didn't have sunglasses or a coat when I got up to Maine. So for people that don't know, I just had my bike in Maine. And so where I grew up. And so I literally bought a one-way flight to Maine, got on my bike and rode it back here. That's like the actual thing that I did. And when I did that, I didn't know what to pack. So I sent all my shit. I went to Amazon, bought like the stuff I had read in a blog that people would use for this, had it sent and never even checked it. So then when I got home, I like had to put it all on my bike and like make sure it fit. But then I realized like, damn, I didn't bring a coat. I didn't bring sunglasses. I didn't bring anything warm. And so I like kind of bought some stuff and then just went for it. And so, you know, if I could redo it, I wouldn't have put myself in that tough of a situation because I didn't even plan a route. So every day I just put where I was going next in my GPS and just sent it. And in a bunch of times it fucked me because I like went out into the woods one time, and it was like one day it hurt me real bad because I went like 4 miles out into the woods on this super rocky path that was like brutal, and it stopped in the middle of nowhere and the sun was going down, and I was like, I have no idea where I am. Like the sun's going down, it's super cold, I'm in the middle of the woods. I was just like, this sucks. So I turned around and I hauled ass out. And I was scared that I was like going to get a flat because it was such a rocky trail. And my fingers were far too numb to change a tire. I was like, if I get a flat, it's going to be really bad. Like, I just know how rough this is going to be to change it. Because I had one night, my seat fell apart on me. And it's like this weird 3-bolt system. And putting it back together with like numb hands was just at pitch dark. Couldn't even see. Like, it was brutal. So I would have planned more, you know, if I were to redo it. If I do another one, I will plan it more. But at the same time, I got what I was going for, which is I like to put my back against the wall. I'm not in it. Like, I'm not setting the record on time from Maine to North Carolina. I never was going to. I wasn't going to if I did it to Florida. And so sometimes I'm like, that's not the part of the detail that I feel like grasping, you know? It's like, for other people that makes them uncomfortable, but I would just submit like that's not what I was in it for. I wasn't like, let me do this as fast as possible. I was like, no, let me put my back against the wall. And so that's what I did. Like my dad's like, oh, are you worried about it snowing? He's like, or no, he was like, oh, it's probably gonna snow. And I was like, well, I'm not doing this to like be comfortable. That's why I'd stay here, right? Like if I didn't want to be in the snow, like I don't know. So it was just
being very clear on the intention of the whole
yeah,
thing,
like
and
what's
keeping that
success
in
for you know? And that's a lesson that goes anywhere. It's like people define success like, you know, for yourself, and then you'll know if you get it, but don't go off metrics that other people use. So I think that made other people more uncomfortable than it made me, you know. Put me in some effed up situations a couple times, but it also like put me in incredible moments, you know. There was one moment where I went through Brooklyn in the Bronx in the morning, across the George Washington Bridge into Jersey. I went through Delaware and Philly, and then I can't remember. I went through like 3 major cities, but the morning started out in in New York City, and then it ended on this like 16-mile trail with tons of deer and just animals out there, all by myself, just riding through the woods, like beautiful sunset. And then I ended up spending 4 hours like riding in the pouring rain after that, freezing at night. But so it was just like, you got everything. And so I got what I asked for.
So, you know, when you're getting all of these different opinions of this whole trip and this adventure coming in, and even like I was concerned at certain points when you would FaceTime me and I would be like, oh my gosh. But I tried not to like project that onto you and just like really be super supportive. But like, you know, people are just like, isn't that dangerous? Aren't you afraid? You know? So like, do you have like, did you have fears before the actual ride, and then during, like, what was your biggest like fear that you had to overcome and go through?
So before the ride, I really did not have fears. Like, I mean, I don't know. I just didn't think about it enough to have fears, I think. Yeah. Honestly, is like, part of it is I've gotten myself out of a lot of crazy situations in life. So I just rely on that sometimes, like probably to a fault. So I didn't have fears. I was like, it'll be fine. I know it will. And it was, right? So there's a part of me that says like, okay, still going. During it though, I thought I was going to get hit by a car a shitload. Like, over and over, and it was like really frustrating, and I would say that was the hardest part for me mentally, is like I had a picture in my head of how people would be on other adventures. People have been really cool, and man, from Maine all the way to North Carolina, people were just total shit to me. Like, that's what it felt like I was just like such an inconvenience to everybody, and in my head I'm like, man, and I don't know what they're going through on the side of on the road. Like, maybe they're late to be at the hospital for their kid's birth. Like, I have no idea. But I do know that, like, I was riding, like, 10 to up to 16, 17 hours a day at the end, and it's like for people to have to move their hands, like, 2 inches to the left and then 2 inches back to the right and then 2 inches over to the right again on their steering wheel, like, to be that inconvenienced and to, like, beep at me and, like, swerve at me and shit, it was like, I was really frustrated, and it was like testing every part of me.
Yeah, so like, what did you do in those moments to kind of help, like, that anger or whatever kind of emotion was going through your head? Like, what did you do to help that, like, flow through you and, like, continue forth without...
The first time it didn't flow through me, I just pulled over, picked up a construction sign, and hucked it off the cliff. Because what would happen is all these construction workers would put up all of their signs in the bike lane. So I would have to swerve out of the bike lane into traffic, which was super scary, especially at low light. And so admittedly, I didn't handle it the best at first. And then over time, I don't know, I think I just kind of talked myself down. Oh, you know what I did? Actually, the bike thing, right? That's what I did, yeah. So, because I was getting really mad. Like, I mean, 4 or 5 days into it, I was, like, getting so pissed. Like,
yeah, I could tell every time I talked to you.
Dude, I wanted to fight. I was getting so frustrated. Like, I was just like, could someone give me a fucking break? But, I didn't ask for a break. Like, I was out there. I was doing what I wanted to do. But it was just getting frustrating. Whatever, it's nobody's job to support you. So I was riding my bike, and you know what it is though? I was becoming really angry, and I didn't like it. And I've put so much anger down since leaving the military that I didn't like what it was doing to me. And, I did this thing I told you about a while ago. I did it 2 years ago, 3 years ago. I rode my bike for a couple 100 miles and bought bikes for kids, raised money and bought kids bikes for Christmas. And I remember when I did it, I was giving it to this low-income population, and they were so grateful. But not all of them were. There was like a quarter of them, or less maybe, that were just so like, this is what you're giving me? Like, just so pissed, right? Like, just not appreciative. And I just remember thinking like, but like, I didn't do it for you. Like, I bought these because I wanted to, and I think your kid deserves one, and he's going to get it, and that's what matters, right? And I just thought about like the pure love that I got from giving somebody a gift that to me like changed my life. Like, biking changed my life growing up, whatever. And so for me, every time somebody would like beep their horn at me or get pissed, I just started thinking like, man, I'd love to give that person a bike. And it sounds so ridiculous, but I rely on these little thought experiments to help me make sense of the world. And this one really helped. Like, everybody, even if they were like a real dick, I still would be like, man, I'd love to buy that person a bike. And over time, it was like, because what happens is we convince ourselves that we care about things that we don't care about. Like, we convince ourselves that when somebody flicks us off, like, maybe we actually, especially if you're like a guy and you're aggressive, like, maybe you think you actually want to hit that person, right? But the truth is, if it came down to it, what you actually want is everything for them to be okay, and they most likely want everything for you to be okay. Now, that's not everybody, but that's certainly me. Like, if I'm really honest with myself, that's what I want. And so that's what I tried to get to. I was like, whatever I'm feeling right now is a fabrication because I'm tired and I'm exhausted, and they're tired and they're leaving work, and like, we're meeting worlds in a really tough place, And I realized, like, for me, actually the key is like, to just hone in on what I actually want for that person. I'm like, well, I kind of want them to have a bike. And so I just like mentally would do that. And it seemed to like allow that anger to like really go away. By the end, I wasn't even thinking about it anymore.
Yeah, so it seems like when like you're in these adventures, obviously, and your physiology is just like so taxed, it's easier for those negative emotions to take over, right? So
Totally.
do you feel like in life now, when you feel yourself, I guess, getting angry or, negative emotions coming in, do you feel like you're able to use joy or any sort of positive emotion to like help with that now after the bike ride?
What do you mean?
So like you used like the internal feeling of joy to, I guess,
like to connect
anger.
with it, essentially. Like I connected with that like deeper truth.
Right. So do you feel like you do that now, like just in your normal day-to-day life?
Oh, if I brought that with me?
Yeah.
A little, actually. I think so. I mean, right when I finished, I went through a real funk, and I don't know why. I think it was part of me just like adjusting to not being on my bike all day every day. There was like a 3-day period where I was like, I was stoked to be done, and I also just felt like I was in a funk. And I realized coming out of that funk as I was like getting ready, like, I've made massive changes to the podcast and my book's coming out and stuff. And I think realizing all of the things I want to do, all of the struggles that I have, getting 1,000 people through the Clarity Academy in the next 2 years, like these are like real goals that are going to require like a lot of me. And I realize like I won't get there if I'm adversarial with myself or with the world. Like that's got to come from a place of joy. Otherwise I won't do all the work I need to do. I won't present the message like I need to. And so having that realization that I have to like connect with that joy and that happiness and create from there, no matter what, has been, I try to keep coming back to it at least. I'm doing the best I can.
So do you feel like that is the biggest internal shift that you had since your adventure, or what do you feel like is your biggest internal shift that you've gone through?
Yeah, I would say that. I found deep gratitude. Just that is what you'd expect from being out there. I remember the first night.
The
wind, yeah. Like we're out. Okay, so it's like kind of cold. I mean, it was like really, really cold when I finished up. I like got super lucky and got to ride through a bunch of days of below freezing weather and wind and snow and rain. And I remember the first night that we were back here, like laying in bed, the window was open and the wind was still like ripping and I could hear it against the corner of the building. And I remember just thinking like, man, I am so fucking grateful that it is the side of this building that's taking the wind right now and not the side of my face. Because for days it's been my face. Like literally for days and days it's been like my face. And we forget, I mean, it's so easy to think that this infrastructure that we have now is we've always had. And it's not true, Like the reason that people are kind of constipated now is because you developed to shit while standing up. Because you didn't have a toilet for all of your evolution for millions of years, right? Like you squatted over a hole. Like people don't understand like all the luxuries we have. Like you were not developed for those luxuries. You have them now, and you're trying to put your human condition into them, and we're adaptable, so it's working. But we take advantage of a lot of things that the world's harsh. And we're not good at handling, like we're pretty fragile in a pretty brutal world. So to just look around and be thankful for all of the sort of structure that protects you every day is like pretty great. It makes it a lot easier to get to that place of joy for sure.
Right. So how would you define a life of adventure? What does that mean to you?
Developing a positive relationship with the unknown. So like on yesterday's show, I did a thing, Life as an Adventure, and I just like something in my own life I realize is like, because I think about my message a lot, and to me my message is the most important message in the world, and if there were a message I thought were more important, then that's what I'd be talking about. So like everyone's got their truth, and that's mine, and I think that like what you really want in life is you want a fantastic surprise. That's what you want. You want your life to work out better than you could have imagined. But you got to let go of what you're holding on to. It's so easy for us to fall into the routine lives that we've created. We've like been really good at paving the wild, and then we fall into routines on that pavement, and it's super easy. But I think what we really want is not, we don't want like even the success we think we want, I don't think we actually do, because we get there and we self-sabotage and we ruin it and we're not happy anyway. It's not what we want. We want life's mystery to reveal itself to us, and it does that through adventure. At least in my opinion, that's what it's been. And that doesn't mean you need to like be out in the world having an adventure. Like there's intellectual adventure, like have the balls to quit your fucking job that you hate. That's an adventure. You know what I mean? And so I think really it's just increasing a positive relationship with the unknown. I think that's what it comes down to.
I think it's also too giving yourself permission to do that.
Totally.
You know, because I just feel like before we started dating, like for me, it was really hard for me to go out and experience life and not feel guilty about it. You know? And that phone call with my mom when she was like, are you, like when I was like, we had a trip to Denver planned and I was like, I can't afford it. Like all these like limiting beliefs, all these excuses. And she was like, are you going to let yourself have this?
Yeah.
So I think that just giving yourself permission to experience the adventure is so big, because I just feel like life in general with you is an adventure.
Sure. Because I call you and I'm like, babe, I'm going to ride my bike from Maine to Florida.
Yeah, and all the other things that you want to do. And I don't know, it's great though, because it's really forced me to grow and expand out of my comfort zones. And it goes back to what you said about, you know, if people looked at my life, they would be like, oh, she loves to be uncomfortable. But it's like, yeah, in my own ways, right?
Totally.
But like getting out of my routines and traveling, and we're talking about doing a 50-mile run next year. So I think that would be like a really good way to like prove to myself that, you know, you can put yourself through hard things and do it, and then allowing myself to like actually participate. And it's not about the outcome.
Right.
You know, it's about the experience, right?
Yeah, and that's what I'm noticing, right? It's like on Instagram, you're seeing it a lot. It's like there's a lot of people out there that are adults. They are not going to be pro athletes. And it's like fitness is by its definition contextual. And so it's like, what are you adapting to? We got people out there adapting to validation. It's like you're not to me, the real beauty of a fitness pursuit, an endeavor, an adventure like this, is that it's an arena to test yourself in and take those lessons to the rest of your life. If you're not doing that with it, it's hard for me to figure out what you're doing with it, because you're not going to be a pro athlete. You're not going to, you know, it's like you get enjoyment from this. But I do think as a rule, we should focus on the part that is going to make the rest of our lives better. And that's how do we handle the adversity that we get, you know? That's the beauty of competing in something. It's like, you know, I think you should compete in whatever it is your thing is, because you should learn to deal with stuff when it's not a perfect day, and competition is never a perfect day, you know? And so you learn to show up your best anyway. You know, it's like when you're just training, it's easy for you to be like, well, I'm just not going to go that hard today, or I'm kind of tired, or I'm kind of whatever. But it's like, no, but like build an arena and put yourself in the arena and test yourself as nobly as you can, and then that's what you get to take and add to the rest of your life, and the rest of your life becomes far better because you've learned how to curate those skills that make you adaptable, that make you successful in a ready-made arena. And then you can go out in life, you know? It's like a lot of people are waiting till their house catches on fire to see if they can like jump out the fucking window, you know? It's like, no, do that in an arena. You know, I think that was the beauty behind CrossFit when it started. It was like adapting to this unknown and unknowable life. I think now we've started to adapt to validation more than that, but that's the original beauty behind it. And that's why I think like you talking about doing this 50, if you decide to do it, it's like, it's such an amazing opportunity to like go through the full gamut of adversity, because 50 miles is long enough that you're going to see it all, right? And so you get to have those conversations with yourself. You get to test what you think. You get to test your abilities. And yeah, and that's why I do them.
Yeah, I do think it is like who you become when, you know, life slaps you in the face. I think you're going to really like figure out the depths of what you need to work on, like the limits of your growth. And that gives you kind of, I guess, a foundation to work from.
Totally.
So.
Yeah, totally. I think my most probably like re-quoted quote that I had was out of an article that I had written a while back, but it was like something along the lines of who you become when you realize that no one is coming to save you is who you were always meant to be.
Shoot, that's actually one of the quotes that made me sign up for the Clarity Academy.
Shit.
Full circle.
Is that your last question?
That was my last question.
Man, thanks so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. Cool. Well, thank you guys. We'll talk tomorrow on Morning Coffee.
You think this life would make me bolder, but I'm running scared is all. Well, I hang on everything about you. You think I'd settle down cause I'm older, but I roll with the changes all. Well, I'm same old trailer trash in new shoes. She gets sad when there's nothing going on, yeah. She says that makes her feel damn worthless. Well, you got to think with a girl like that, any love at all. It's better than nothing. Well, it's better than nothing. Well, I put my hand around your shoulder. You're saying you're scared is all. Well, I think I know too much about you. Well, you think this life would make me colder. I give in to the alcohol. I put my loving arms around you, child. You knew damn well there was nothing going on, yeah. Is that what makes you feel damn worthless? Well, you got to think with a girl like that, any love at all. It's better than nothing. Well, it's better than nothing. Good God, well, you got to think with a girl like that, any love at all. No, no, better than nothing. Well, it's better than nothing. Yeah, well, she drags you down and she pulls you up. She pulls you up, yeah, yeah. Says that she's sorry now, but it's not enough to pull you up. Well, she's sorry. I wake up quick just like I want to. Yeah, but I stay out much too late.